Hi everybody, I'm a couple days late for Top 10 Tuesday, but this week the subject is Martin Scorsese, one of my all-time favorite directors, and so I want to make a video about him. Lately the guys, Ian and James and the like, they've been doing top 10s on actors and whatnot, and I don't really, I never really made a top 10 list for an actor just because their performance is only one small part of a whole movie and they're not really responsible for a lot of what happens, unless of course that actor is also directing the movies. There's only a few guys that do that. But yeah, a top 10 of Scorsese is definitely something that I can do here. So my number 10 would be Taxi Driver, which came out in 1976 and stars Robert De Niro as Travis Bickle, the cabbie who becomes obsessed with two women, one of whom is Sybil Shepherd, who works for the campaign for a guy who's running for Senate out of New York City. And on the other hand, you have the Jodie Foster character Iris, who's an underage prostitute working for a pimp. And he becomes fixated on both them and their supposed father figures. In the case of Sybil Shepherd, it would be the politician played, whose name is Charles Palantine. And in the case of Jodie Foster, it would be her pimp played by Keitel. This was one of Scorsese's earliest big successes. Although he had a critical hit with Mean Streets, Taxi Driver was a critical and a commercial success. And there have been times when I haven't really liked the movie just because the main character is just so antisocial and just has a lot of issues. So I don't always find it a pleasant movie to watch or even think about. But there's a lot to like in the movie. And since I've gotten older, I've come to enjoy it more. I can sort of remove myself a little bit from the unpleasant nature of the character and how he may remind me of aspects of my own personality. But yeah, Taxi Driver is a darn good movie, of course. My number 9 is called Who's That Knockin' on My Door? Prior to Mean Streets, this was a feature film that he made that really wasn't seen by a whole lot of people until after he became a well-known director, and then people went back and looked at it as an earlier movie. It stars Harvey Keitel, much like Mean Streets. Takes place in New York City, also very much like Mean Streets and Taxi Driver. He's not part of a criminal organization. He's not part of guys who shake people down and demand protection money from businesses like he was in Mean Streets. He was sort of partnered with De Niro for that. He's just a guy, basically, a single Italian American guy living in the city, dealing with his friends, dealing with the woman that he's interested in. He has certain expectations for the women that he would want to make a life with, what have you. I don't really know a lot of the actors in this movie. It's in black and white, super low budget, but it's a decent movie, real decent movie. I like it quite a bit. It's been a while since I've seen it, but yeah, it's pretty interesting. My number 8 is The Last Temptation of Christ, which came out in 88, I believe, 1988, and stars Willem Dafoe as Jesus, and also a lot of Scorsese regulars like Keitel and Paul Argo, I believe his name is, as the disciples. Andre Gregory shows up as John the Baptist, right? And Barbara Hershey plays Mary Magdalene, and David Bowie plays Pontius Pilate. And it's not adapted directly from the Bible. It's based on the novel, which is sort of a speculative about Jesus and basically his last few weeks before the crucifixion and stuff that happens actually after that to him. A lot of people did not like this movie when it came out. It's like, this needs to be a straight adaptation of the Bible. Anything else is just blasphemy, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, it's a movie, it's fiction, I mean, people let that kind of thing, let that kind of thing bother them way too much. It's very atypical for Scorsese, but there's some interesting stuff going on there, and I find it really fascinating. Yeah, a lot of people have big problems with it, but I think it's quite an interesting watch. I like it more than a lot of the modern movies he's made with DiCaprio anyway. It's definitely unusual for him. My number 7 is The King of Comedy. This is a really terrific movie. Robert De Niro, of course, is the main character. Rupert Pupkin, who's an aspiring stand-up comedian, and he wants to take every shortcut he can. He thinks his material is brilliant, although he's never performed in stand-up comedy nightclubs before. He manages to meet the host of a evening talk show, who's very famous, and that character is played by Jerry Lewis, and he tries to get him to agree to appear on a show without actually really auditioning or anything like that. And Jerry Lewis sort of palms him off and says, "Yeah, okay, sure, we'll talk about it later." And as he keeps refusing and has his staff turn him away from his offices, Rupert Pupkin gets more and more desperate, and he enlists the help of one of his friends, not really a friend, just someone who can't stand him, but someone he associates with, Sandra Bernhardt, to help him kidnap the Jerry Lewis character so that he can blackmail the television studio into giving him a guest hosting spot on the show. It's not harsh the way a lot of other Scorsese movies, not overly violent, or doesn't have huge amounts of profanity the way a lot of Scorsese's harder pictures do. It's actually rated PG. It's really funny, and the character's just so diluted and what have you. He has a number of fantasies throughout the movie that we see dramatized on screen, where he's talking with the Jerry Lewis character like they're best friends, and at one point he drags this girl that he knows out to Jerry Lewis's character's house to pay him a visit. I was just like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't a fantasy, isn't he? He's actually going to the guy's house to talk with him. That's crazy. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is him basically staging an imaginary talk show in his basement with these cardboard cutouts of Liza Minnelli and some other person, and he's pretending to have a conversation with them on TV, which is it's really, really funny movie. And a little scary too. My number 6 movie is Raging Bull. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, good. I just want to make sure I have that number right. Raging Bull, of course, is another movie with De Niro. Was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director. De Niro won Best Actor for playing Jake LaMotta, the notorious boxer who was insanely jealous of his wife, played by Kathy Moriarty. Another movie also in black and white. This one was a real critical darling as far as the style of it goes. When I first saw it, I didn't like it at all. I thought it was terribly unpleasant. The guy was just awful. I had a conversation with my brother. Did I mention that earlier? What were we talking about? We were talking about a game show. Right, no, that was for another video I was making, sorry. Years ago, about how there are a lot of comedies that have kind of dumb people as main characters because that's funny, but not a lot of dramas, except for this one. Jake LaMotta is not a very smart person, and his younger brother is played by Joe Pesci in the movie. Joe Pesci, of course, has been in a few Scorsese's movies. He's sort of training him, but at the same time arguing with him and fighting him half the time, fighting his wife, and just generally just being really unpleasant and entitled and just like full of a lot of rage, for lack of a better word. He's really a ferocious boxer, but in every other aspect of his life, he pretty much sucks. I saw this movie again a couple of years ago. I sort of rewatched all of Scorsese's movies, and I ended up liking this one a lot more. Not a pleasant movie, not an easy watch, but there's a lot to admire about it. My number 5 is The Color of Money. The Color of Money is a movie, probably the first Scorsese movie I ever saw. It stars Paul Newman as Eddie Felson, which is a character he played in a much earlier picture called The Hustler, which I believe came out in the 60s. He's a pool shark. He's an expert pool player, and in that movie he was basically had a big sort of match with Jackie Gleason. In this movie, of course, he's much older. He doesn't play pool anymore, but he comes across this young hotshot kid played by Tom Cruise who's really, really great, so he decides to train him to be an expert in the game of 9-ball and make lots of money. Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio also is in this movie. If you might remember her as playing Maid Marian from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. She was also in The Abyss, of course, with Ed Harris, the James Cameron picture. So the three of them, they go on the road, and Paul Newman's character, Fast Eddie, is trying to teach him how best to play marks and how best to win a lot of money. And this kid Vincent, he's just like sort of really kind of uncontrollable, a little like Jake LaMotta, except he's not quite as violent. He just wants to show what he can do at all hours of the day, wants to just play pool and beat everybody. But the problem, of course, that he just can't seem to get through his head is that when you show such skill, nobody wants to play you because they figure that you'll lose. And it ends with a big match, a big competition in Las Vegas, where there were a whole bunch of guys playing 9-ball against each other. Really like this movie a lot. Again, it was sort of like my introduction to Scorsese, and it's a good one to start with. Yeah, it's not violent the way a lot of his other movies are. It's just a good movie. One movie that is quite violent, my number 4, The Departed, the Best Picture winner for 2006. Scorsese finally won a Best Director Oscar for this movie. Of course, The Departed has Leonardo DiCaprio and Matt Damon as two guys on opposite sides of the law, pretending to be more or less each other. DiCaprio is a cop who's pretending to not be a cop, pretending to work for an organized crime figure played by Jack Nicholson. Meanwhile, Matt Damon actually does work for Jack Nicholson, but he's been in the police academy and he is now in an investigative unit. And so they've both basically been are trying to find out who the other guy is, trying to find out who the mole is in each other's teams. There's a really good cast in this movie. Mark Wahlberg, of course, got an Oscar nomination. He's the only guy in the whole movie to get an Oscar nomination for the movie. He's hilarious in the movie. Martin Sheen, Alec Baldwin, Anthony Anderson, Vera Farmiga, a bunch of really great people in the movie. Lots and lots of fun. My number 3 Scorsese movie is Cape Fear, once again starring De Niro as an ex-con who travels to Florida, where his former attorney Nick Nolte is now living and is planning a campaign of terror against him. Jessica Lange plays Nick Nolte's wife. Juliette Lewis plays the daughter that comes under threat because Katie likes the young girls in the worst way. And of course there's that famous scene which the two of them, basically, he corners her at school by pretending to be her drama teacher and then slowly tries to convince her that he's a really nice guy and that her father wronged him and that she should be on his side instead of her father's. Really good scene. And I like Juliette Lewis a lot in that movie. Haven't liked her in many movies since then. She's a little, I don't know what it is, something about her that's not great, but I really like the movie a lot, and I just love the style. It's just so impressive. Yeah, that's my number 3. My number 2 is After Hours, a movie that came out in the 80s. It's very atypical for Scorsese. It's another comedy about a guy played by Griffin Dunn who lives in New York City. He meets this girl played by Roseanne Arquette and then calls her on the phone later and she invites him down to her Soho loft so they can hang out and maybe get frisky, whatever. He's hopeful that he'll get a little action. And everything just goes totally wrong for him. He has so many things happen to him over the course of the night. It's just crazy. Big cast in this movie. Linda Fiorentino, John Hurd, too many to even name. Catherine O'Hara, I can't even remember half the people that are in the movie. Cheech and Chong are in it in small parts. Scott Bakula, if I remember that name right, he has a brief appearance in the movie. I just couldn't, my jaw was just hanging open for most of this movie, all the crazy stuff that happened to him. Really fun movie, very funny. And of course, my favorite of Scorsese's movies, my number 1 is of course Goodfellas, which should have won Best Picture, should have won Best Director instead of Dances with Wolves. Didn't happen. One of the greatest movies I've ever seen in my life, maybe the greatest. One of the most important reasons why I like Scorsese as much as he did. The cast is amazing. It's all about, this gangster, Henry Hill, who went into witness protection, later wrote a book about it. Robert De Niro, Paul Sorvino, Joe Pesci, Lorraine Bracco, all these incredible people are in this movie that has such incredible style. It's just very propulsive, sucks you into the whole gangster lifestyle, the whole world of these guys. It's just an amazing film, and one of my favorite movies ever. So there you go. There's my top 10 Scorsese movies. Hopefully I'll do this next week too, whatever the top 10 subject is, I don't know. But I'll have links to the other guys' videos below, of course, if you want to see them as well. I still haven't seen the weekly chat video, so I need to get on that. Maybe I'll make a video on that tomorrow. Thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it. And also, I just wanted to remind you, if you don't know already, that I have a Facebook page if you want to comment or give me feedback or anything like that. It's in the link below as well. Thanks very much. Bye.